recent CES event showed us a number of cool tech new gadgets that we'll be getting later this year. Amongst them were a bunch of awesome monitors. It's kind of hard to say, but I'm sure it's got you talking, or at least looking online for where you can possibly purchase these in the future, or whether or not one of these new monitors that come out later this year is right for you. One question that comes up quite a bit, especially in the PC gaming space, is whether or not you should stick with a regular monitor or if you should go ultra-wide. Now this also applies for a lot of console gamers as well, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. PC gaming has always been at the forefront when it comes to being able to take advantage of this new technology. And I know that the consoles are getting a little bit closer now, but certain things are still missing. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be comparing my two monitors. We have a 32-inch LG monitor on this side and a 34-inch LG ultra-wide on this side, connected to my sim rig. I'll kind of talk about my specific use case and why that might be important for you as well. So you might be looking at a normal monitor, which is a 16:9 aspect ratio monitor, or an ultra-wide. You don't know where to begin, you don't know where to do your research or where to start. The first thing it comes down to is your rig, your gaming PC. So in my case, my ultra-wide is a 3440 by 1440p. So resolution wise, it is not exactly a 1440p monitor, but it is a little bit above that. It's not a 4K one either. So the reason I bring that up is because you need to be looking at your PC in terms of it being able to handle games at that specific resolution. So in my case, I do have the 4090 attached to these monitors, but before that I did have a 2080 and I was using that for my ultra-wide, and I did not have a single issue with that. It did mean that I had to tone down a couple of things here and there when it comes to the texture, the details, all that stuff, and I might not be hitting 144 frames per second, but in most cases I would be able to get it above 60 frames per second most of the time. So that is one of the key things you need to be looking at when you're looking at an ultra-wide. The next thing is space. Now in my case, I got really excited. I bought the ultra-wide. It was a 34-inch, so it kind of still fit in my desk. But let's just say that things got a little crowded. And don't even get me started on the super ultra-wides, which are even bigger than these ones. The key thing is to make sure that you have the desk space to be able to fit an ultra-wide, at the same time making sure that it does not interrupt or interfere with how your desktop setup normally is. The next thing will be if you're looking to mount it, or if you're just gonna put the stand as is, or just gonna put it straight on your desk. I recommend mounting it just because it does clear up that desk underneath you. I've kind of noticed that initially with my ultra-wide, but also with my other monitors as well. I haven't done it with this one just yet. It does clear up a lot of space, and at the end of the day, when you're at this desktop setup, you want it to look clean. You want it to look minimalistic as much as you possibly can. And it does go a long way. If you are looking to just keep it on the stand on your desktop, look at the ultra-wide monitors and just compare each of them and the type of stand that they come with. Sometimes those stands are a little bit way too big, kind of overarching, like these little pointy things that are coming out. Sometimes they are almost like a monitor arm. So definitely do your research on that as well. The next two things kind of go together, but next thing you should be looking at is whether it has Gsync or Freesync support, which is for AMD, and Gsync is for Nvidia. At the same time, the refresh rate that you're going to be getting with the monitor. Depending on the GPU that you have, you might want to have an ultra-wide that can support that specific technology. But in most cases, I have seen that a lot of them are able to kind of work with one another. For example, the Alienware Quantum OLED monitor that's out there, they have a Freesync and a Gsync version, but the Gsync version is a bit more expensive. However, the Freesync one works with any Nvidia GPU without any issues. In fact, Gsync will work on that monitor as well. So just kind of be mindful of stuff like that. And this is one point that I might kind of keep to the side. I don't feel like a lot of people will look at this, but in case you are looking at an ultra-wide that has HDR, a lot of times they come with HDR 400, something like that. It's not perfect. In most cases, I do turn it off because I do notice that the colors look really grayed out. So far, I have not really seen an ultra-wide or even like a regular monitor that has really good implementation of HDR. But in case it's something that you want and it's part of the whole feature set, you might as well get that one because you can always turn it off. So now that you've done all your due diligence, you make sure that you have a monitor arm, you have enough desk space, all that stuff, and you're ready to get an ultra-wide. The next issue that might kind of come in is games and their compatibility. So not all games have ultra-wide support. Most of the games that I've tested, especially newer ones, do, which is a good thing. but you still might notice weird issues with them here and there. For example, sometimes you might get cutscenes that are shrunk or put into a 1440p or a 16:9 aspect ratio. Sometimes the menus might be stretched out, but when you play the game, it goes into that full ultra-wide mode. So there's issues like that you might see here and there, but in most cases, you should be good. The key thing is to make sure the games that you own, the ones that you want to play on your ultra-wide, do support ultra-wide. So as I hinted earlier, one specific use case for an ultra-wide is sim racing. Now I got into sim racing just last year and I've kind of fallen in love with the whole genre. But if you are someone that is interested in sim racing or are even interested in the new Forza Motorsport game that will be coming up later this year from Xbox, and you might be thinking about getting a wheel or even playing it on your controller, playing those kinds of games on ultra-wide is pretty awesome. In my opinion, any racing game should be played on an ultra-wide. This does not mean that other TVs or monitors are not as good, but if you have an ultra-wide and you have the right implementation in that game, it does give you a really good view of the whole circuit in front of you, and it really is quite immersive. And that kind of goes into my next point about ultra-wides, and that is immersion. That is honestly one of the key reasons many people will consider an ultra-wide. You might hear this term quite a bit being thrown around as a marketing tool or by other people in general, but I'm here to say that they're kind of right and wrong. Sure, when it comes to the sim racing genre, for example, I can definitely see it being a bit more immersive. I'm able to look left and right, see the side mirrors, overtake if I need to or not. It does kind of help if you're playing racing games on an ultra-wide. Similarly, if you're playing an FPS game like Call of Duty, Apex Legends, Valorant, it is quite useful to have that screen space. Especially when you bump up the FOV slider in those games, having an ultra-wide does help quite a bit. It doesn't make you see everything on the screen, so it's not like you have some sort of next level advantage, but it does give you a better view of the entire map in front of you. And many of these games, especially newer games, do a good job of making the UI fit the ultra-wide monitor perfectly. Badly implemented games will have horrible HUD layouts where you'll see the mini-map on the complete top right, or your gun and the ammo you have left on the complete bottom left. In many cases, you should be able to kind of bring that a little bit closer in your eyesight. But again, if it's optimized well, if a game is made for an ultra-wide monitor, they'll kind of do all of that for you. I know we're mainly focused on gaming, but it is also a really cool monitor to be able to just kind of do productivity stuff, you know? If you have a number of Excel sheets open, or your Outlook email plus an Excel, or your something else in an Excel, I don't know why I keep saying Excel, but you get what I'm saying. So now looking at a regular monitor, so a 16:9 aspect ratio monitor, a lot of the stuff that I just kind of spoke about with an ultra wide, you need to keep that in mind for this as well. So if you're looking at a monitor that is doing 1440p, 1080, 4K, whatever it may be, you need to make sure that your GPU and your PC can handle that resolution. One good thing is in terms of desk space, these monitors do kind of fit everywhere. At the same time, I still recommend that you should use an arm or some sort of mount to kind of pull it up, just to kind of clean it up a bit. But overall, it should be a little bit better to kind of manage than ultra wide. The other thing that you should also consider is the size of a regular monitor. Now, in many cases, ultra wides are already quite big and you can just kind of go bigger from there. But regular monitors, you do have a variety of sizes you can go from. For regular monitors, one of the key things that you need to look at is your distance from that monitor. So the reason that I'm bringing that up is, let's say you have a 27-inch 1440p monitor and a 32-inch 1440p monitor. When you compare the two, the 27-inch will look a little bit sharper if you are close to the screen. On the other hand, if you're a little bit further away from the screen, the 32-inch and the 27-inch will basically look the same. In fact, the 32-inch will look a little bit better because it is a bigger monitor. It's the same thing that you need to consider for TVs. If you have an 80-inch 4K OLED TV, but you sit extremely close to the TV, it won't be a great time. However, if you have an 80-inch TV and you are really far away from the TV, it will look much better. Similar to the ultra-wide, you should also look at the refresh rate technology like Gsync, AMD's Freesync, all that stuff. Make sure it kind of suits your needs. Like I said, with the ultra-wide, in many cases, they do kind of work with the other. I haven't really seen that issue pop up as much, but something to keep in mind. So many people might not like that I say this, but even if you have a 27-inch or a 32-inch 1440p monitor, you can still kind of use both sides of the monitor to do various tasks like Excel and a PowerPoint or whatever it may be. You don't necessarily need something as big as an ultrawide for that. You can make do with one of these monitors or regular one itself. One last thing to consider for both monitors is whether it is an IPS panel or a VA panel. So IPS is in-plane switching and a VA panel is vertical alignment. So the key difference mainly you'll see is an IPS panel is usually more likely to be able to hit higher refresh rates. So you'll see panels that are going up to like 500 Hertz or something like that. At the same time, the viewing angles for an IPS panel is supposed to be a lot better than a VA panel. But again, all this stuff is quite subjective, so something that I would recommend you kind of checking on your own, maybe doing a bit more research if you can go in person to see one of these monitors. But in most cases, as long as the monitor is able to hit the refresh rate that you want it to hit and is hitting the resolution you want it to hit, it'll be fine. So something that I discussed earlier was the viewing distance for these monitors. Now the reason that that's quite important is because the pixel per inch can change depending on the size of monitor that you have. Just think about it this way. If you have a 1440p monitor in 27 inches, all those pixels will be accumulated in those 27 inches. Whereas when it's a 32 inch or something higher, it'll get stretched out. Of course, it does not mean that the image will look bad, but the pixel per inch will reduce. So in my case, my 32 inch 1440p monitor is around 91 pixels per inch. And similarly, my ultrawide is around 108 pixels per inch. Now both those numbers aren't bad, but you can clearly see that the ultrawide, obviously in terms of the resolution and the size, is kind of hitting that perfect 100 or above range. Now deciding between both of these monitors might be quite tough. As you can see, it was quite hard for me to make the decision, which is why I have both. But if I had to just pick one, it would definitely be the ultrawide. Now that is again going to my specific use case because it fits my sim rig perfectly. At the same time, I do have a PC rig that is able to handle that resolution, and I'm able to hit or get close to that 144 frames per second. The key thing comes down to immersion. So now of course it does not apply to all games, so it does matter what games you're playing and how you want to play them, and of course if you're able to kind of hit that stable frames per second that you need. But if you do have those games that you feel fit this kind of mold, it honestly is an awesome experience. Not only getting a better resolution, at the same time you're able to kind of have this grander view of the entire map or area, and it's just small details that you'll kind of notice. Like I said, I notice this quite a bit in sim racing when it comes to just seeing that circuit in front of you. But it's something about playing on an ultra-wide that just does not kind of match a regular monitor. Now when it comes to the PS5 or an Xbox Series X, you do need to make sure that these monitors have AMD Freesync, which is what those consoles use. And of course you gotta make sure that these monitors are able to hit at least 120 frames per second and that they have HDMI 2.1 support. Now the PS5 and the Xbox Series X both have 1440p support, but if you move it to the ultra-wide side, it does not really quite work. Both those consoles don't have ultra-wide support. You can use an ultra-wide with these consoles. You just have to kind of shrink down or bring it back to that 16:9 aspect ratio, which many of these monitors do allow you to do, but otherwise the screen will look a little stretched. I did try using my PS5 to play Gran Turismo 7 on my ultra-wide and it did not go well. Here's hoping we get GT7 on PC. So if you're a console player, definitely stick with a normal monitor just because you just won't be able to utilize the ultrawide to its fullest. You should also check out a 4K monitor at that point because 4K monitors have gone down in price, especially ones that are at high refresh rate and also have AMD FreeSync. I personally would also wait for OLED monitors, but they will have a premium price attached to it. So thank you everyone for joining, really means a lot. You know what to do. I'll see you next time. Bye.